We'll call this meeting to order. I'd like to welcome everyone here tonight. We'll start off by roll call if the clerk will call the roll.
Mayor Jackson is absent. Mr. Miller,
Here.
Mr. Bowen is absent. Ms. Cordova.
Here.
Mr. Lopez,
Here.
Mr. Lucero,
Here.
Ms. Parker is absent. Mr. Robinson.
Here.
Thank you. We have a quorum.
I'm here.
Sorry. Chad.
Yeah. Mr. Heflin is present. So
I skipped right to the bottom.
everyone will please stand. Councilman Robinson will lead us in the invocation, and Councilman Heflin will lead us, now that he's present, will lead us in the pledges.
Father in heaven, we come to you tonight to ask your continued blessing on our great community. Continue to watch over the young people in our community. Work with our employees as they perform their performances of their duties. And be with the mayor tonight. Be with Ms. Parker as she continued to comments on her lost family member. We pray you in the name of the Father and the Son. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I salute the flag of the state of New Mexico, the Zenith symbol of perfect friendships among united cultures.
Thank you. Okay, we will move forward with scheduled business. The first item is minutes of the previous meeting held June 21st, 2022.
I move we approve. Second.
We have a motion by Councilman Lopez, a second by Councilman Robinson. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Next item is resolution 22-2301, a resolution committing City of Portales opioid settlement funds for the purpose of establishing a regional behavioral health facility in eastern New Mexico. Ms. Austin.
As you know, we had the feasibility study done for the mental health facilities, and with Curry County, Roosevelt County, Quay County, DeBaca, and the city of Clovis, including Portales, we all wanted to do a unified effort to put our funds from the opioid settlement towards that mental health facility. And this resolution would allow for that to be appropriated to the facility itself. I do stand for any questions you may have on that.
Questions from Ms.
Right.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Miller, I have one. Do we know the amount yet? I mean, I think the amount is still out there, right? We don't know exactly what that
They
is.
did give an estimated 49 million. That might be a little bit high. However, they're still wrapping up everything, and then we'll do another presentation right before it gets time to even think about building or remodeling.
And that's gonna be in Curry County,
Well, as of right now, yes,
tentatively.
tentatively.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? It's a pleasure to the council on this resolution.
Move to approve.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion by Councilor Cordova, a second by Councilor Heflin for the approval of resolution 22-2301. Ms. Martinez Terry, will you please call the roll?
Yes, sir. Ms. Cordova,
Yes.
Mr. Lopez,
Yes.
Mr. Lucero,
Yes.
Mr. Robinson,
Yes.
Mr. Heflin,
Yes.
Mr. Miller.
Yes. Thank you. Next item is public hearing for ordinance number 760, an ordinance pertaining to city employees, establishing employment policy and procedure for city employees of the city of Portales, New Mexico, and the repeal of the city of Portales ordinance number 733 and replacing it with a new chapter 19 personnel policy. First item I need is to have a motion to enter into a public hearing on ordinance number 760.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Councilor Cordova, second by Councilor Lopez. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. We're now in a public hearing, and I would ask if there's anyone in the audience that'd like to speak in favor of this ordinance. Is there anyone in this audience that would like to speak in opposition to this ordinance? Seeing none, I'll entertain motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Counselor Lucero, second by Counselor Heflin to close the public hearing. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign, motion carries. Next item is action on ordinance number 760. Is there any discussion amongst the council with regard to this ordinance? Questions? What's the pleasure of the council on this ordinance?
Mayor Pro Tem, I move to approve.
Second.
Motion by Counselor Lucero, second by Counselor Lopez. Further discussion. Ms. Martinez Terry, will you call the roll?
Yes, sir. Ms. Cordova?
Yes.
Mr. Lopez?
Yes.
Mr. Lucero?
Yes.
Mr. Robinson?
Yes.
Mr. Heflin?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes. Item D is request to remove the motion from the table of the denial of a variance to ordinance number 689, construction requirements for development in Ravenwood Estates in relation to brick exterior and cement block fencing. So I would need a motion to remove this from the table.
So moved.
Second.
Have a motion by Counselor Robinson, a second by Counselor Cordova. You do a roll call on this, Joanne.
Yes, sir. Ms. Cordova?
Yes.
Mr. Lopez?
Yes.
Mr. Lucero?
Yes.
Mr. Robinson?
Yes.
Mr. Heflin?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes. So the denial of the variance that was tabled a couple of meetings ago is now back on for discussion. We had some discussion about this. I visited with the New Mexico Municipal League. Frankly, we cannot grant a variance to an ordinance. The proper procedure for this would be that we have to actually change the ordinance or amend the ordinance. So if someone wants to do this, then what we need to do is get with the city manager, the city attorney, draft an intent to adopt or amend an ordinance and bring this back with the amendment so that we can change the ordinance. We cannot do it by variance. Is that not correct, Mr. Dorr?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. So there's actually no action that can be taken at this time with regard to this. So that if the next move would be to, again, bring back to this body the intent, and then we have to go through the procedure, notifying and having the public hearing with regard to amending the ordinance.
Mr. Miller, question. Can there be any discussion about that? The reason I ask is I see that Mr. Broomfield and his partner here that came from Georgia and Houston, I believe, right? And to address the council in any way.
Well, I mean, there's no action
I
that
know
can be
there's no action
taken,
to be
so
taken.
we need to move on. Okay, I appreciate you being here. I'm sorry. We did some investigation on this and we were advised that the only way to do this is by amending the ordinance. So that will be the next thing and we will notify you of when that will be on the agenda. The next item would be to adopt the intent. And then we have to publish the ordinance with the amendment, wait 30 days, come back, have a public hearing as we did on ordinance number 760 to take opposition and support, and then vote on the amendment to the ordinance. So it will be about what, end of August? If we do the intent at the next, meeting, it would be then the second meeting in August
Yes, sir.
before we would have the public hearing and action on the new ordinance.
I guess my question is, why wasn't this brought up and, changed on the agenda or not even on the agenda whatsoever? I mean, why are we wasting this time now, to do something that's take no action other than the tabling? I understand that part of it, but.
I'm sorry, I don't understand your question.
Well,
You have to, you've already taken action on it.
and then it just stops and then we gotta,
What you're doing tonight is saying we want to discuss it further. So the next step is to come back and ask if you want to, how you want to handle that. Like Mr. Miller, Mayor Pro Tem said, you can't do anything tonight. It's an ordinance. It can only be changed by another ordinance.
Okay.
So it depends on what the next proceeding is going to be how you want to, how this council wants to move forward.
And frankly, by rule, if we didn't bring it off the table, then it would
It would never go
indefinitely be on the table.
Alright.
So we needed to bring it off the table.
I understand that part.
Okay.
Okay.
All right,
Do we need to make a recommendation to,
you, just whomever would do that, would take it to Steve and Sarah and ask them to draft that intent and whatever changes to the ordinance that you would put in that intent.
Steve, will you draft the ordinance, please?
Well, if you might clarify, you know, the specific action they're asking you to change is contained within the ordinance. And it's very unusual ordinance.
Yes.
Usually you bring in the Veronica Cordova subdivision like that. This one has the different language in it. So you have to address the entire ordinance and take action to revoke a portion of it or to modify it. And that's going to have to be whatever the motion, whatever this body wants done. And that's going to have to be taken probably at your next council meeting to determine
Okay.
which step you want to take and how you want to take it. And after that, we can bring it back for consideration. And if
My
that's
suggestion
enough,
would be to look at the ordinance, see what changes you want to make,
And then.
and then
Steve.
be ready for at the next meeting to do the, adopt the intent to amend, revoke, or whatever that particular ordinance. And set with council and whomever and make sure that we do it properly.
I think it would have to be amended because you can't revoke it. We have a subdivision in town. If you revoke it, then it's no longer a subdivision, which is not what you want. So it just have to be
An amendment.
to modify or amend the existing ordinance.
Okay,
Mr. Mayor, can it be any sooner than the council meeting?
no, sir. Unless we had a special council meeting, that would be the only thing.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
So,
You would still have to go through the ordinance process, which
Yeah.
is the notice of intent and then the ordinance.
Well, what I'm saying is that wait 2 weeks and then we have to do something else. If you
And
have
30
a
days after
special
that.
meeting, then it just makes it.
Yeah.
I mean, if the council wants to do that, I don't know.
I think that's a discussion we would want to have with, when the mayor is back also. But we can have that discussion, so. And I think there's a procedure for asking for a special meeting if so. All right, we're gonna move on. Our next item on the agenda is item F. Another request to remove the motion from the table of the amended agenda item titled approval to authorize the city manager to negotiate a contract with the town of Elida to bring back to the city council. So I need a motion to bring this off the table and make it the next item of business.
So moved.
Motion by Councilman Robinson,
I'll second.
second by Councilman Heflin. Let's do another roll call on this.
Ms. Cordova,
Yes.
Mr. Lopez,
Yes.
Mr. Lucero,
Yes.
Mr. Robinson,
Yes.
Mr. Heflin,
Yes.
Mr. Miller.
Yes. Item G, now that that's removed from the table, is action on a request by the town of Elida for the city to provide limited law enforcement services. Miss Austin.
Yes, we have Mayor Dixon here tonight and the chief of police that could answer any questions that I was unable to answer last time. I do believe that the mayor of Elida would still like to come before you and request that we provide those services and to let you hear from his side of it, if that is appropriate.
Mr. Mayor,
Stand over here.
would you come over here and
I feel kind of isolated over here. So, no, my main concern is we need a little traffic control out there. I don't need a full-time officer because that involves me having to have a municipal judge, a municipal clerk, and it's just, it's not feasible for us, but we do need a little traffic control during, mainly during the school year, school zones, weekends, just, where it's got out that there's no one there, and have that $45,000 in LEPF money that we could transfer to the city of Portales And I talked to your chief and we kind of worked out a schedule. It comes out to about $75 an hour for what time an officer would be out there. I know the fuel to get out there and back was an issue, but I calculated that up. If they came once a week, it would be $650 for the year. If they split it up and came twice a week, it would be about twice that. The only drawback on that is BFA wanted agreement in by about the middle of June, and she said she'd give us a few more days if we needed it. And it got tabled at the last meeting, so we would have to get back with them and see if that's even a possibility for us to do that with them now, because it's been more than a few days since middle of June, so. I don't know, the chief probably has, I have no idea what the details are on their end, but that's what I've got.
That's your request. Is there any questions for the mayor while he's at the podium? Mayor, I have a couple of questions. I wasn't here at the last meeting and I
Okay.
apologize. Why are you coming to the city for this?
I went to the county first and they were unable to provide me any assurance of any traffic control out there. He just said, we don't have the staff. We're not authorized to have enough staff for us to dedicate any time to that. He said, if we can, we will, but I'm not comfortable entering into an agreement where I put everything up on my end and have a maybe on the other end.
I have a couple of concerns that I'd like to just put out there. You mentioned DFA. So, I mean, to receive law enforcement protection funds, you need a department and you need personnel or an approved memorandum of understanding on this. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And that's what you were referring to with regard to visiting with DFA?
Yes, and I already have I've already been approved for the funds. I got the paperwork from your chief a month ago verifying that you guys are eligible to receive those funds, that you're in good standing as a police department, and I don't know what I was on that. Chief?
They had also, this year, they'd also put in a caveat that you have to report your uniform crime report stats, which they changed to NIBRS. Our records management system is NIBRS compliant. And since they haven't had a department, they're not reporting would be the zero. When I did a check on calls for service law enforcement related to the town of Elida, there were 38 in 12 months. And I believe about 20 of them were alarm calls at the Allsup store. So it didn't seem like it'd be too much of an issue for us there. We could add them in as in our records management system to continue with that compliance and everything else.
And this isn't a unique agreement. There's about 25 other municipalities across the state doing something similar.
Okay.
I looked through the list. There was about 25 municipalities receiving LEPF funds that showed 0 officers.
Okay. I got a couple more questions, but Councilman Heflin.
This
has
won't
a-
take an officer off our streets in our city, will it? Will this be a new position for another officer?
It would be in addition to what we were doing.
So it'd be we would
Oh.
still have the same amount of patrol cars for our streets in our city?
This would actually get us 1, if not 2 more, if we were able to get that, because we weren't able to get any vehicles this year. We could take that 45,000 and get us at least the 1 vehicle this year.
I'm talking more about like the officer themselves. Will it be a
No,
new
for
position?
12 hours a week, it wouldn't be any problem. We were contacting Safer New Mexico, where we get our traffic grant from. And I was waiting for Mr. Baumann to get us a written confirmation, but because it's US 70 running through both, we would be able to actually use our traffic safety money. So it would be a 0 cost to the city. They could go out and do it on traffic overtime.
I think what Chad is saying is that our officer that's going to be there will not be on our streets.
It would be
That's
like
correct.
on their normal time off. It wouldn't interfere with regular shifts.
as in an like they'd be working the overtime, like the overtime grant. And that's what would cover their salary.
That would be considered overtime?
If they're working the traffic control, it will be on the overtime grant, yes.
I quite don't understand, because they still employ with the city. And so that's an additional hours, so, and then I just heard you say that they would not be, they'd be off work. So how could it be
Right.
considered overtime?
So they work so many hours and then they're off. And if they work on the time that they're off, they receive overtime. And the Safer Grant allows for them to have more paid overtime at the cost of the grant and not the city.
Okay, to be clear though, let's leave the Safer New Mexico out of it for this point, right? Because not all of this is going to be Safer New Mexico. What the officer that is going to be delegated to this 12 hours is not going to be on the clock with his regular patrol.
No.
So those 12 hours, whether it's Veronica or me, or we split it, we're going to get paid overtime for those 12 hours. Is that
Yes.
correct? Okay, that's what I think we were wanting to get to the bottom of, right?
That's what I just wanted to make sure our streets would still.
And are you done with your questions?
Yes, I'm done.
Okay,
Thank you.
so what happens, Mr. Mayor? And I mean, I don't know whether this has been contemplated in the agreement, but what happens, Mr. Mayor Chief, when we lose 3 officers and we're not able to do that? Because we need those, we don't have anybody, we need to make sure that our streets are covered, or we have, because the first priority is here,
Absolutely.
to our citizens, regardless of,
And let me add, I'm not one to take away from anything from you guys. I just,
I understand where you're coming. I just want to make sure that the agreement,
right,
if we weren't able to fulfill the agreement because we're short-staffed or something like that, we're,
I want an agreement that's that is beneficial to you as well as me. I'll bend over backwards to make it work, whatever it takes, but that isn't something that we have discussed, and in addition to this, if we can get this done, I've got a brand new unit that I could make a lease deal with the city to get you guys by till you get new units or whatever. If you're shorthanded, I don't want to sell it till I see how this works out, because we may end up with a police department again a year from now, and I'll need that unit back. But if the lack of a unit's an issue, I've got a brand new unit sitting there. And
So to lease to us?
if you guys are needing another unit, I have a brand new unit I'd be willing to. I don't really want to sell it yet. If this works out and we end up not having a police department again, I would be willing to sell it. If we don't and we end up trying to reinstate a police department, I would still need that vehicle back. But we'd be willing to make a reasonable deal for that new unit to be put into Portales Police Service.
okay, Mr. Robinson has another question.
Mr. Mayor and Police Chief. Now, the type of service we're only talking about, let's be clear, is traffic. But I thought I read somewhere in your writing or proposed writing that you wanted police service as well, like checking streets and et cetera, rather than traffic control.
I can answer.
I
that,
don't
sir.
understand your question, but
Well, if we would need them to be commissioned by the town of Elida as police officers, because we all know you make a traffic stop, person has a warrant or anything else, they have to have the ability to continue with that. So they would need to be able to affect that arrest, or if they stop the DWI or anything like that, so that they could take care of that.
So they would be commissioned by whom?
Elida,
Elida, by the mayor.
Are they allowed to commission?
yes. I can give you the example of Artesia and the Village of Hope have the same agreement.
I
think-
still think that we need to look into making sure that Elida can commission.
It's just no different than the city of Portales can give us the authority to have a police department. It's the same thing.
But then they would be employed by the town of Elida.
not necessarily.
The MOU stipulates who's in charge of that, and that that MOU would outline that the town of Elida gives us the ability to commission.
That's true.
Mr. Mayor, I got a question.
Okay,
Uh, How come the sheriff department, the sheriff is elected by the county? And it's the obligation, I think, of the sheriff to take care of Elida, Dora, Floyd, or whoever out there out of the city limits. You
That is
have a problem
actually a
with that?
municipality on the same grounds that Portales is. So yes, they have the authority to enforce the law there the same as they do here in Portales.
Well,
It's
sure.
no different, but they have no manpower to provide a city traffic or any traffic patrol out there is why I'm here. So
They have no manpower to take care of you?
according to that, they can cover if we have an emergency, but not for not to come work traffic. And you want to weigh in?
Yeah, so my understanding with,
well, can you identify yourself just for the record, please?
yeah, good evening, Mayor Pro Tem, good evening, council. My name is Javier Sanchez. I work for the sheriff's office. I'm a lieutenant there at the sheriff's office. I know Sheriff Parker negotiated with Mayor Dixon about pretty much the same thing that we're talking about tonight. So one of the major concerns that he had was he wanted a set number of hours that we would contract with the city of Elida in order to get some of the LEPF funding from them. So my understanding from Sheriff Parker was that he wasn't willing to say, we will give you 12 hours a week or whatever it was. We will get out there, we'll do our patrols. Our guys go out there all the time. We also have Elida and Floyd school zones. We'll rotate through those. We generally only have 2 guys on shift at a time. So what they do is they'll rotate. One will go to Elida, one will go to Floyd. The next day, one will go to Dora, one will go to Floyd, however it works out. But I think one of the big concerns was we weren't able to say, yes, we will promise you 12 hours a week or whatever it was. So that was something that we weren't willing to say, yes, absolutely, we'll give you X amount of numbers of hours.
Okay, does that answer your question, Counselor?
And just one other thing is, if we still get calls for service there, we are taking the calls for service. Whether it's an emergency, whether it's a report, dog bite, burglary, whatever it is, we are still responding to all those calls and we're still taking care of all that stuff.
Well, I figured the sheriff would be all over the county anyway,
Yes, sir. We're,
but what he's talking about is 12 hours to stay in town, right?
Yes, yes. For district, I mean, my main complaint from my citizens is the traffic's pretty much out of control there. There's my last officer would catch people at 90 plus coming through town in 35-mile-an-hour zone. And since we don't have an officer there and we haven't in over a year, it's just gotten worse and worse with time and because that work travels fast. Highway 70 is a highway that gets a lot of traffic and it's a lot of repeat people going through there on a weekly basis that learn.
But to me,
that,
12 hours is really nothing.
well, that would give us some coverage, for a couple of
week,
school zones
I
a
mean,
week or on a
12 hours
weekend
in
if
a
school's
week,
out.
bro.
I realize what you're saying, but I can't afford a full-time police department, or I would rather, and if you have a one-man department, you have to have someone qualified to be a chief, just like you do. You can't have, if you have a one-man department or 100-man department, you have to have one guy that's capable of doing the chief duties, and that's just out of my budget.
Okay, any other questions for the mayor or the chief or the sheriff-elect here? So,
The only thing that I just wanted to state, because you weren't at the other meeting, was we did talk about if a lawsuit happened in Elida and we got pulled into that, then that was going to take that full budget away with one lawsuit.
and that's a good point. I would like to make sure with the league that, we would be covered under our policy in this extracurricular, because that's with House Bill 4 right now, it's a big concern. So do you know the answer to that, Chief Williams?
do not.
I think that's a major concern, is that this individual that's off duty
Right.
and working this would be covered under our law enforcement protection fund, and any HB4 issues would be covered,
I have
Under
no
that.
problem reaching out to Mr. Forte though and asking the
or
question.
Clinton.
Right.
Or
I mean,
Clinton.
the other option would be is that they could do a part-time department, and then it's employees working straight for the city of, or the town of Elida.
Well, I think those details need to be worked out before we take any action. I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor, but
And that's why, I believe that's why Ms. Austin was wanting to try to move forward with the negotiations.
I think what's on your agenda is to allow her to enter into negotiations with
That's-
me. It's
that's
not an
correct.
approval of anything. And I'm easy to work with. and if
Well,
you guys-
actually,
we can
the,
Work out an agreement. It's not gonna hurt my feelings. I can,
our item on the agenda is action on the request by the town of Balata for the city to provide limited law enforcement services. That's what's listed on our agenda as our action item.
okay.
So
But isn't this the same as the other item where we have to untable and then,
we already did untable it. That was the first thing we
yes,
did.
and then
So it's on the table. That's why we're discussing it.
put it back on the agenda? Don't we have to put it
It's
back on the?
actually on the agenda right there on the next item.
We have to,
So this one doesn't have a time limit like the other one?
No, because the other one's an amendment to an ordinance.
Okay.
But do we have to change the agenda to appropriately say it's for the open negotiations for the city manager to enter into? Because it's not, it doesn't say that in item G. It says to.
Take
actually-
action. Yeah.
Take
When
action.
you remove it from the table, it's open for discussion. It's the same thing as if you introduced it.
So it's just back,
Yeah, back to the.
turning the
second page.
clock back. Okay, so we don't have to,
No, you're finishing up and you can instruct the manager how you want to proceed if you request additional information. Or if you want to proceed with a contract pending this or pending that, we can work on that. Get the information back to you and get a draft agreement back to you at your next meeting.
May I ask the mayor a question? Mr. Mayor, you have a time limit?
I tried to get back in touch with Department of Finance today. She gave me a few more days back in the middle of June, and that wasn't a specified number, so I guess she was not in the office today. I tried to call her, and
I called her and I emailed her and I haven't heard back.
yeah, so I tried repeatedly to contact them today and see if this was even a possibility, but she had said we could have a few extra days. It might just delay the time that I received the LEPF payment that I would forward to the city. It might put a delay on that if it's a little longer.
They were on the list from DFA
Yeah.
as having the award.
We're on the list. They just can't send that out till we have an agreement in place.
And they approve the agreement. Yeah. So what's the pleasure of the council at this point?
Mayor Pro Tem, I move to approve for the city manager to continue negotiations or start negotiations with the town of Elida for services for a contract for law enforcement for the stated times.
Second.
Okay. And obviously that'll consider the concerns that were addressed tonight by all of us. Okay.
Correct.
I have a motion and a second to have the city manager continue to negotiate and bring back an agreement to provide these services to the town of Elida. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign, motion carries. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
Item H, approval to use vendor on CES for update to the PER for public water tank storage facilities pending CES review and approval. Mr. Deshay or Ms. Weems or both.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Council. This is a request to use CS vendor Stantec to update our PER. We have to do this every 5 years so that we qualify for funding. CES, the vendor Stantec is the actual original producer of the PER under another name. They've since been folded into a couple other companies. We do this in anticipation of receiving the water from the Ute Pipeline project. So if we do this now, we'll be able to seek funding to do any upgrades or routine maintenance type things to the Lime Street tank in advance of that that project being completed. And the funds that we have here, the 106,000, that is in budgeted funds.
Questions from Mr. Deshay? It's a pleasure of the council.
Move to approve item H.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Cordova, second by Mr. Heflin. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign.
Thank you.
Motion carries. Item I, requesting approval to destroy outdated records in the municipal court department described as municipal court records, court dockets for 2017-18, accounts receivable daily reports for 2017 and 18, and correspondence emails for 2017-18. Who is presenting this tonight?
I guess we are. We're just presenting it for the judge. She asked for that to be on the agenda. And I believe that Ms. Austin asked the attorney to review it, and I believe he's okay with it.
Yes, the only question we had was, can emails be destroyed? And he did confirm that they can be after a certain amount of time.
Any other questions for staff on this request? Pleasure of the council.
I make a motion, we approve to destroy records.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Lopez, second by Mr. Robinson to allow the items to be destroyed that are listed in this item. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Our next item is public input for which no action will be taken. Any matter not known about or which could not have been reasonably be foreseen prior to the time of the posting of the agenda. This agenda item is for informational purposes only. Public comments will be limited to 3 minutes per speaker, limited to 1 presentation per meeting, and no more than 6 speakers on each subject. Councilors will not respond to comments or answer questions to avoid any possible violation of the Open Meetings Act. Questions or requests for information should be directed to the city manager in writing during regular business hours. Anyone over here have any public comments? If you like, this would be a good time if you would like to make a comment. You got 3 minutes. Please, and identify yourself.
Adam Broomfield, one of the developers in the Ravenwood subdivision. I'm curious if there's anything we can do to expedite the process, and I will gladly do any extra footwork, legwork that I need to do in between now and the next meeting to try to make that happen. It just seems that every step of the red tape shows us more red tape. And in a previous meeting, one of you stated that, we didn't want to impede progress, and we want to see the city of Portales grow and benefit from these things. And that's what we're looking to do, is just, benefit the city that's really helped us out in our journey. So if any of you think of anything in your off time, or if anybody that's here today can think of anything or know of any way in any of the other ordinances. I found an ordinance 250 that was talking about granting variances, and it seemed like it was something that could grant a variance to an ordinance. And I'm not sure how that works, but I feel like there's got to be something to expedite this process or move it along a little bit faster, because it's just slowing down the process of moving these things forward. The city of Portales is currently lacking for new construction for these homes to be sold on these entry-level properties. And the longer we wait to start, the longer it's going to be to get to the end product. And supply chains are improving, but that doesn't mean that they will stay improving. And the longer we wait to make these changes, then the longer it'll be before we can order materials, and the longer it'll be before things can get here. And there's if the last 2 years has taught us anything, it's that we can't predict what's going to happen. We don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. We don't know what's going to happen a month from now. And the longer we wait, the more detrimental it can be to the city of Portales.
Thank you. Thank you. Anyone else?
My name is Stephen Robertson. I live at 1834 Dillonwood Drive. I live in the subdivision that this is coming up with, and I would encourage the process because I do believe that there is a public notification and form as part of this process that goes through. As one of the people that will be affected, my personal home will be affected by that in the dropping of value or the possibility of it. I do not wish to drop progress, but I do have a personal concern on how it directly affects me and my neighbors. And I would like the opportunity that when this comes forward, that we have the public forum and all of our voices are heard before we move forward with this.
Thank you.
My name's Eldon Merrick and I'm with Buena Vista Realty. And I'm representing a client that's been under contract since January and is trying to get a business started here in Portales and is also running into red tape roadblocks. And every time he tries to call and get information, calls are not returned. He gets some feedback from secretaries on it, and he's starting to get frustrated. He made application, I think, in the middle of February. And this is on a grow house here in Portales. And there's been, seems like every meeting, I keep looking on the agenda to see if it's going to be addressed, and it has gone through committees. It's gone through several procedures, but he's got to the point now that he was informed that they never received the checks for the application, so he sent more money in. They should have received that. I don't know if you received it today. It was addressed to you, John.
I wouldn't be receiving any checks.
Well, it was sent to you. So I'm just pleading with the council to try to quit dragging their feet and get this thing going, because this is a guy that's going to employ 10 to 15 people and could be up to 20 once he gets started. And he's really starting to get frustrated with the process. He's done this in other states, other cities, and has not had near the conflict that he's had here. So.
Thank you, Mr. Merrick. Thanks for making it aware. Anyone else?
My name's Phoebe Privet. I'm a realtor with Berkshire Hathaway in the Clovis Portales area. I'm not going to rehash all the stuff that I talked about last time, but I did want to just remind the council of the information that I gave you last time I was here, that I have talked ad nauseum to appraisers and other realtors that do a lot of business in town, that there's a misconception that there is going to be a drop in values in the Ravenwood area if these houses don't have brick, if they don't have cinder block. Just wanted to remind you that the appraisers themselves said they do not appraise, they don't ascribe any value to those particular facades. And as a realtor, we don't either when we're doing comparables and things like that. The bottom line is, if things are taken care of and they're well kept, then they look nice. Everybody loves them. It's more a matter of maintenance and things like that. And if people are taking care of their stuff. So an appraiser is not, according to them, according to the phone calls that I have made, they are not going to ascribe any value to those particular facades. So in reality, a $250,000 house that's stucco is exactly the same as a $250,000 house that's brick. They can be exactly the same floor plans. They can look exactly the same on the inside. They're still going to appraise for the exact same amount. So just wanted to remind you of some of that stuff that I have already talked to you about.
Thank you. Anyone else? Anyone over here? Anyone on the council? Okay. Our next item is an executive session Action to convene in a closed meeting to discuss matters as provided under New Mexico statutes pertaining to open meetings referencing attorney-client privileges pertaining to threatened or pending litigation, the purchase, acquisition, or disposal of real property or water rights. I need a motion now to go into closed session.
So moved.
Second,
Motion by Mr. Rosello, second by Mr. Heflin. Ms. Martinez Terry, will you please call the roll?
Ms. Cordova?
Yes.
Mr. Lopez?
Yes.
Mr. Lucero?
Yes.
Mr. Robinson?
Yes.
Mr. Heflin?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes. Okay, we will be in closed session. Can I get a motion? Can I get a motion to come back into regular session?
So moved.
Motion by Ms. Cordova, second by Mr. Robinson to come back into regular session. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Only those items that were mentioned in the reference to go into closed session were discussed. No action was taken and no action is needed. We are adjourned.